Connor McDavid still doesn't have an extension. I'm starting to get nervous.
You are Locked On Oilers, your daily podcast on the Edmonton Oilers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this Monday edition of Locked On Oilers. I am your host, Nick Zararis. This upcoming October will be my 10th season doing digital hockey content, my 4th season as a member of the Locked On Podcast Network, and I want to thank everyone that is making Locked On Oilers their first listen of the day. Locked On Oilers is a part of the Locked On Podcast Network where we've got your team covered every single day. So today's episode is going to be me rambling a lot. We're going to break it up into 3 segments. We're going to start with putting ourselves in Connor McDavid's shoes. We're going to talk this out. We're going to do a little role play. Our second segment, we will game this out. We will talk about the contingencies, the hypotheticals, and then our final segment, I'll give you my best guess as to what I think is going to happen, what the ultimate resolution will be. So, to start things out, part of understanding these situations, part of getting an understanding of big picture negotiations, back and forths, and just really getting a feel for the situation comes down to a few overarching themes. Number one, and this is the baseline of most conversation, you're going to assume that everybody is acting rationally here, that what is being said publicly by the Oilers, by McDavid, by McDavid's people, is all reasonable, that is all fair, and that it is rooted in the truth, that the Oilers have told Connor, we will give you whatever you would like to sign. We also need to put ourselves in Connor's shoes, which is what we're going to do here. And we need to think about what he has said. Connor has repeatedly banged the drum saying, I want to win. I have no problem signing here if I think we have a chance to win. And to unpack that, and Connor is extremely strategic. I was going to say resourceful, but he's strategic in what he chooses and doesn't choose to communicate. And we all know this. We've all been in situations where we have to read what's around us, but take a gamble. And that's a lot of this conversation for me from the McDavid perspective. I think it's reasonable to say the Oilers are asking Connor to take more of a leap than he is of them. We know that the Oilers will give McDavid as many years and as much money as he would like for each category. If Connor wants to sign a 3-year deal worth $16.5 million per year for 3 years, he'll do that. If he wants a 8-year, $17 or $18 million deal so it can adjust for inflation over time, yeah, I think the Oilers would be more than happy to do that as well. And that's the trick here. Because if Connor really is just trying to decide whether or not he thinks the Oilers can win the Stanley Cup, that's kind of an impossible litmus test. And I say that as someone who puts a lot of time into understanding hockey as best they can and knows they will never know everything. I think anybody who tells you that they are the ultimate expert, that they know everything, that no one knows more than them, I think that's disingenuous. I think that is more of an idea than a reality. And the Oilers are going to be, game theory wise, a reasonable bet. I think Vegas is definitely better. I think Dallas is definitely better. I think Colorado is definitely better. Beyond that, I think the Oilers are probably the 4th or 5th best team in the West. I think the Jets could be better, but I don't think they are. Minnesota could be better, but I don't think they are. The Kings, I don't think they are, and I don't think they can be. I think their defense is, especially losing Gavrikov and Jordan Spence in the same offseason, I think the Kings are going to take a real step back there. The Flames, Utah, Vancouver, St. Louis, those teams maybe could have better regular seasons, but I don't think they are as serious of Stanley Cup contenders. And it is important to make that distinction that some teams are better built for the regular season or the postseason. I think teams like the Carolina Hurricanes are a great example. I think that is a team that is built for the regular season, that the war of attrition over 82 games, that accumulates and gets to a point where you are going to consistently win 45 to 55 games every year, the way Carolina is, the way they're able to interchange guys in and out as players leave, they're able to find replacements. I think teams like Edmonton, I think teams like Vegas, I would dare say Dallas, Colorado, Florida, Tampa Bay to some degree, those teams are built for ceiling. And I understand McDavid's hesitation to commit here. I think the Oilers, by virtue of having so much uncertainty, and even in the near future, let alone the long-term future, I think I get it. And again, we're taking Connor at his word that winning is his number one priority, and that if he feels the Oilers have a good chance to win the Stanley Cup, he would like to stay. I think if you're the fourth or fifth best team in your conference, you're at worst the eighth or ninth best team in the entire NHL, I think you're on the fringes. I think you are on the precipice. And when I say eighth or ninth, I'm talking mostly about regular season results, not playoff results, as the last 2 years will tell you. In the regular season, the Kings were better last year. The Stars were better last year. Vegas was better last year. But when push came to shove and these teams were lined up across from Edmonton in best of 7 series, the Oilers got to a higher ceiling. And in the regular season, you are playing for floor. In the postseason, you're playing for ceiling. You're trying to get hot at the right time so that you play like this as opposed to like this. And some teams don't translate what they do well in the regular season in the postseason because it is not conducive to that. I think we're all pretty skeptical of any Winnipeg Jets team being able to win the whole thing because being a defense and goaltending team is so much harder in today's NHL. And look, as a quick caveat, yes, the Florida Panthers are a defense team, but their best players are superstar forwards who buy into that mentality. Barkov, Tkachuk, Reinhart, those guys all play a style that is conducive to playoff success on top of that defense first acumen we were talking about there. And ultimately, and this will be the parting thought for the opening segment, there's no way for Connor to know. He is going to have to take a leap of faith here in making this decision. If he does not feel the Oilers can win the whole thing, which I am increasingly in agreement of, I think it's more likely than not they're a first or second round exit this upcoming year just because they have so much uncertainty, especially on the wings. I think I get why there's a bit of apprehension there. I get why might be a bit concerned they haven't upgraded the goalie position yet. And I know there's conjecture about goalie upgrades in season, maybe ride the waiver wire, try and snipe somebody. I just do not think the cards are here. And if Connor, and real quick, as an aside before we wrap up, I know I said last point, but I thought of this while I was talking. Connor is a loyal dude. He would like to stay. He also might not be convinced of his goal. He might not be convinced this group can get there. Maybe he wants to see what Ike Howard and Matthew Savoie are like firsthand and see what their trajectory looks like. And that might be part of his informed decision. But there's a whole lot more to get to. Coming up next on today's edition of Locked On Oilers, we're going to put ourselves in the Oilers' shoes and try and think this one out right after this. Most people can't name all their financial accounts or even what they're worth, whether it's 401ks, properties, or investments. And when you don't have the full picture, you can end up leaving money on the table. That's why there's Monarch Money. It's an all-in-one personal finance tool that brings your entire financial life together in one clean, easy-to-use interface on your laptop or phone. Monarch is built for people with busy lives. If you've put off organizing your finances, Monarch is here for you. Monarch does all the heavy lifting. You can link your accounts in minutes, see clear data visualizations, get smart categorization of your spending, and finally feel in control of your money. And Monarch Money promises you will never, ever touch a spreadsheet. Monarch made me aware that I wasn't saving as much as I needed to, both for my long-term plans, being able to buy a house someday, maybe hypothetically, and then more short-term things like an expensive pair of headphones, vacation, and Monarch has given me active target goals for me to keep up with to help me stay on track. Do not let financial opportunity slip through the cracks. Use code LOCKEDONNHL at monarchmoney.com for half off your first year's subscription. One more time, monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNHL, and you'll get 50% off your first year's subscription. Thank you to everyone who is hanging out on this Monday edition of Locked On Oilers. Thank you to everyone who is making Locked On Oilers their first listen of the day, getting their week off to a good start. And we're getting there, folks. We're about 2.5, 3 weeks away from the start of the regular season. And as training camp turns into preseason games, there will be more to talk about. And I know I haven't really done a lot of prospect camp coverage because, frankly, I just don't think there's a whole lot to glean there beyond surface level analysis. I don't think you can take a lot from those prospect games in terms of building blocks. I don't think the quality of competition, I don't think the intensity is there. So I do acknowledge that. But getting back to our topic at hand, the story across the NHL. And we know this. We know the Oilers are going to give Connor whatever he asks. This is not really a negotiation as it is a mental journey, maybe is the way I would describe it. Connor is the one who needs to make the decision here. Now, the Oilers have trickle-down problems here. So, number one, this roster has a lot of turnover on the horizon. Mattias Ekholm, Jake Wallman, Adam Henrique, Stuart Skinner, Calvin Pickard, all unrestricted free agents after this year. That's your two best left-handed defensemen, both of your goalies, and your defensive. And look, Henrique's not a massive change, but that is a player that needs replacement. Without Jake Wallman and Mattias Ekholm, who the Oilers need to bounce back and have a good season, this is not a particularly serious hockey team. And we have seen teams try this hyper-aggressive build. We have seen the Toronto Maple Leafs have 4 guys take up almost half the salary cap. We have seen the Vegas Golden Knights do this. We are going to see the New York Rangers do this going forward with Shesterkin, Fox, and at least Panarin for one more year, where you have 3 guys making at least $35-40 million total. And it is tricky because the more money you spend on fewer guys, the less there is to go around. And when you have less money to go around, you need to start taking risks. You need to do things like sign reclamation projects like an Andrew Mangiapane or depth pieces like a David Tomasek from Europe and hope that they hit. Because right now, the Oilers, as we discussed last week, are probably going McDavid, Draisaitl, Nugent-Hopkins, Adam Henrique down the middle. That's fine. It's not great. It's not elite. But it's fine. Nuge in a smaller role, maybe a bit more of a defense-first matchup where counting stats won't be the best barometer of his performance. Maybe that works. But if you're Connor and you're gaming this out in your head, you're trying to get an understanding of the trajectory of the team with no considerations for Wallman, for Ekholm, for both goalies, that is massive. It is hard to overstate just how hard it is to get one of those right. There are teams that spend half a decade looking for a number 3 defenseman like Jake Wallman. There are teams like the Oilers, like the Red Wings, who have been on the goalie carousel for much of the last 5 to 10 years. There are teams that once you lose that bell cow, that franchise caliber goalie, you do not recover from that. And it's not a coincidence that a majority of the teams that hang around year after year after year are going to have the same goalie room. They're going to have Jake Ottinger. They're going to have Shesterkin. They're going to have Connor Hellebuck. The Avalanche here, an outlier. They went from Kemper to Georgiev to Blackwood. And the more stability you have, the easier it is to plan, both for you as the executive, the decision maker, and for your guys, because I think there's probably a part of Connor that was curious why Bouchard took a 4-year deal as opposed to going for max term. And I think Connor's smart enough to deduce that with the money that's going to be coming into the system over the next handful of seasons, you're better off going short. And we'll talk more about what I think the ultimate resolution is here in our final segment. So I don't want to step on my toes. But the Oilers are at an organizational crossroads. This is the best hockey player in the world. He has been the best hockey player in the world for pretty much the last 8 years, maybe 7 if you want to be a little more charitable to Sidney Crosby, 2017 or 18, sure, that's fine. But I think when you have a player of this caliber, you cannot adequately replace them. Teams go centuries without having a player this good, and I know that's hyperbolic. The NHL has only been around for 1 century, but there are organizations who will never have a player this good. I dare to say there are 30, maybe 31 NHL teams that will never have a player of this caliber. And again, that sounds hyperbolic, but Connor McDavid is arguably the best person who will ever play in the National Hockey League. Now, I'm not saying it's a guarantee. I'm not saying he's on that trajectory, but he is the best hockey player I have ever seen. In my expert opinion, this is the best player I have ever seen. I didn't see Mario. I didn't see Wayne. I didn't see the Rocket. I didn't see Gordie Howe. I have seen Sid. I've seen Ovi. McDavid is the best I have ever seen. And look, Nathan MacKinnon is great. Nathan MacKinnon is more physical. He's stronger. He might be just as fast. He might have a bit more snarl or intimidation to his game. He might be a bit more of a fiery leader. But Connor is the best hockey player I have ever seen. He is the consensus best player in the world right now. And the problem here, if you're the Oilers, and I talked about this with Gil Martin on Monday's Locked On NHL, which you should check out on the national feeds, wherever you get your podcasts or over on YouTube. If you are the team that is oriented around 1, 2, 3 guys, and you are reaching one of these contract impasses, the way the Leafs were with Mitch Marner last year, the way the Islanders were with John Tavares, was that 8 years ago now, you are still trying to win to appease those guys. In the case of Mitch Marner, he had no trade protection. He was not interested in being traded. Of course, that purported Rantanen for Marner swap was out there in the ether. You know, that's been reported by more than one person. But Marner put the kibosh to that. So that might not be the most fair comparison. But at the same time, I wouldn't be shocked if we got to a point in December, if there was still no contract, Stan wasn't at least making calls. And again, that is not an endorsement. Under no circumstances should the Oilers even be mildly entertaining the idea that they're going to need to trade him. They need to do whatever it takes to get him to stay. Because organizations do not recover from losing players of this caliber. And yes, I know the Islanders went further in the playoffs than the Leafs ever did with Tavares. We'll see what ends up happening with Marner in Vegas. But as teams that are actively trying to win in the present, you cannot subtract players. You cannot subtract star players. The Oilers need to be going as far as they can to get more guys for Connor, for Leon, for Bouchard to build around to entice them to stay. And maybe David Tomasek, Ike Howard, Matthew Savoie, maybe one of those guys is the Bowman ace in the hole. The Connor, look, I know you're a little concerned about the future of this team, but we found these guys. We found Podkolzin. We found Kapanen. We'll find more guys. I promise. That is a reasonable pitch. Now, it is incumbent upon those guys, at least one of them, to come out and deliver. But it's not implausible that 1 out of 4 or 5 guys has a decent season and is a reasonable enough proxy for some of the production they've lost, that you warm up Connor a little bit and you convince him, okay, we have questions, but I know these guys. And if we keep adding to the group that I know so well, we're going to have a chance. And coming up next, we're going to take our final break. When we come back, I'm going to tell you what I think the ultimate resolution here is right after this. The NFL season is here, and FanDuel is making sure you're ready for kickoff with a can't miss offer. Right now, new FanDuel customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use on the FanDuel app. I love using FanDuel because it makes however you like to play easy. If you want to put together player props, if you want to use a same game parlay to put something together with your friends, or if you get a vibe as a game's happening and you want to get in, live betting makes it happen. Tonight, absolute classic potential between the Lions and Ravens. Thursday, sneaky good game between the Seahawks and Cardinals, who both look like they're pretty good teams. So FanDuel has one question for you. Are you ready? Download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com to place your first $5 bet for a chance at $300 in bonus bets. Thank you to everyone who is hanging out on this Monday edition of Locked On Oilers. And as this story looms, it will only increase in decibel. And we know that. We all know how this works. I myself have been very conscientious of not milking this story this summer. We've done 2 episodes about this since, I would say, early July. It is the middle of September now. I understand this is the single most important story in hockey right now from a transaction and narrative perspective. There are some social questions to be answered about the potential of the World Junior guys from the 2018 Canadian team getting back into the mix that I think are probably more pressing as far as like the health and vibrancy of the league. But this, hockey-wise, is the biggest story in our league. Yes, Sidney Crosby may be leaving Pittsburgh. Yes, JT Miller being named the Rangers captain amid the mess they've been the last couple of years, narrative-wise at least. The best player in the world is 8 months from unrestricted free agency, which would be all hell breaking loose. I do not think it is an exaggeration to say Connor McDavid reaching unrestricted free agency on July 1st would be the biggest story in the history of the league. And because of the scale here, and it is important to note the scale, this is all people are going to talk about until there's a resolution. Now, I don't have an authoritative answer here. I assume, like I've said, and I've maintained, the holdup here is Connor needing to convince himself about the direction of the team. I think if we're being objective, this group has a lot more question marks than either of the past 2 iterations that have made the Stanley Cup final. I think the long-term trajectory of this group is absolutely in question. I think those are valid critiques, especially when you consider the ages of the supporting cast like Zach Hyman, Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, Mattias Ekholm. I think the inconclusive nature of the goaltending room, especially its future, begs a question of what good can the Oilers realistically do at that position unless they draft a guy or they find one that becomes available. And as we've discussed all summer, it's really hard to find a goalie. It is really hard to find a good goalie. There are teams that will spend a decade looking for a reasonable starter. I think you can point to Cam Talbot, the rookie Stuart Skinner season as the 2 best examples of that, where you got the season you were looking for, but after that you didn't have the consecutive seasons of quality play, and the variance within those positions makes it so challenging to get it right. And if you're the Oilers, and I've said this pretty much all summer, if you cannot find a way to make this work with Connor, it is a cataclysmic failure, because at that point you're starting over. And yeah, you have Leon for 8 years and he's got the full no move, so it's on him. You got Bouchard for 4. But even if you get a haul, even if you get the magic box of assets, we surmise the Montreal package, if you get Lane Hudson, if you get Demidov as the foundational piece, and then a couple picks, and then like a Caden Gooley, or maybe, I don't know, I wouldn't say Slavkovsky. You probably couldn't do Demidov and Slavkovsky, but you would need 2 or 3 NHL caliber players who are all young and cheap. You would need several draft picks. And you still would not feel good. And that's the thing here. There is almost no world where trading the superstar player works out well for you. Matthew Tkachuk, it will not work for the Flames. It does not work for you trading the superstar player. It is almost impossible to acquire the 5 quarters and hope you got more than the team with the 2 singles. It is just hard to do in our league, the way money works, the way star players handle their trajectory, their careers. They don't want to move. They want to settle. And look, maybe we get something new here. I think the most logical assumption, the best guess, is a 2 or 3 year deal that is going to be the richest contract in the league. Now, if Connor wants to leave some money on the table so the Oilers can get another depth forward or maybe upgrade one of the goalie slots, I think that's fine. If Connor wants to get his maximum earnings, 17, 18, not even 19 million per year, that's fine. He deserves it. He's the best player in the world. He's the team's most important player. If you want to keep him, he gets to set his own price. And I think part of the reason you haven't seen Jack Eichel or Kirill Kaprizov sign extensions yet is because they want to see what Connor does. Because I do think if Connor takes a 2 or 3 year deal, that's going to start to become the norm. And look, we saw Austin Matthews make a motion in that gesture, in that direction a couple of years ago when he took only a 4 year deal at his current price point coming off of an RFA deal. But if you go short, if you're Connor, you can get out of here in 2 years if the team falls off a cliff, if they don't support you. You can adjust your earnings. You can earn more money. 2 years from now, he'd probably clear 20 million per. So he definitely will clear 20 million per. At some point in Connor McDavid's NHL career, he will make more than $20 million per year, unless he doesn't want to. If he wants to do the Crosby, the Tom Brady, the Bergeron, if he wants to leave money on the table so the Oilers can build out the rest of the lineup, that's fine. But I don't think he should. I don't think he should do that in terms of he should not feel obligated to do that. It is your responsibility as the general manager, president of hockey operations, to build the infrastructure around him that you can win if you feature the best player in the world. But until we get a resolution, this will continue to be a sore spot. This will continue to be a point of conversation. But that will just about do it for this Monday edition of Locked On Oilers. I want to thank everyone that made Locked On Oilers their first listen of the day. Locked On Oilers is a part of the Locked On Podcast Network where we've got your team covered every day. If you could be so kind, please subscribe to the show, whether you're on Apple or Spotify. If you're over on YouTube, hit the subscribe button. We're inching up on 2,600 subscribers. Very grateful to everyone who's getting on board. I will see you guys tomorrow. Until then, let's go Oilers.